Shattering Myths. I am Yahowah. It's my pleasure to welcome in al-Rassooli. IQ is the world's foremost expert on the religion of Islam. He is the wisest and most courageous man I know speaking on this subject. One of the very few people in the world today that's willing to tell the truth about Islam and speaks from a position of absolute knowledge. It is impossible for any Muslim apologist to argue with al-Rassooli. They will lose 100% of the time because his statements regarding Islam are based entirely on what Muhammad and Allah, they are one and the same, had to say and what they did. IQ, my pleasure to welcome you to Shattering Myths.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
IQ, I want to go through a number of things that happened in the last 2 days and get your take on them. The United States is celebrating the killing of Jihadi John, the British fellow that was shown in the videos that purported to be beheadings of 2 American journalists. You watched those videos, didn't you?
Yes, of course.
Was there actually a beheading in those videos, or were those videos unlike every Islamic beheading that we have seen of the many hundreds of videos that you probably watched prior to those?
There was no beheading. There was a purported idea of beheading, but there was no actual beheading.
Correct. And matter of fact, even the shot with the head on the chest at the end was photoshopped in. There was no cutting of the neck. There was no bleeding. There was no screaming. There was no gurgling. There was none of the things that occur in any one of the hundreds upon hundreds of Islamic beheading videos that we've seen.
True. Absolutely true.
So we know that those videos were staged for a reason. Why do you think that the Islamic State staged videos of beheadings when there was actually no beheading? What would they what did they want to achieve by doing that?
First of all, to intimidate the West, and second of all, to bring more jihadists into the fold.
Okay. I'm going to give you a third reason. I'm not going to disagree with either of those 2 reasons. That terror is instrumental to Islam. The whole idea of the Quran is you continue to terrorize them so that they will be afraid of you. 33rd Surah lays that whole strategy out, that you'll be so merciless, so cruel, that no one would dare to rebel against you, to oppose you. I'm going to lay a third reason out. While you are the person who correctly assessed Islam's beginnings, that Islam began as a criminal enterprise, and it stayed a criminal enterprise throughout its entire life. All you have to do there is read the Battle of Badr, and you'll understand that Islam was established as a criminal enterprise. But it ultimately became a death cult, and it thrives on killing. If you don't have an enemy, it's really difficult to thrive in killing. You need a foe. And so I think that the Islamic State tweaked America's nose because it wanted America to engage and to attack it. It wanted to stand up and say, we are the point of the Islamic spear. Look at us. Even America now is at war against us.
It sounds extremely logical. Yes. Very, very logical and reasonable. Yes.
So America played right into the Islamic State's hands.
So did Russia. So did France. So
right.
did Britain.
That's exactly right. It is what they wanted. And if you think about it, well, why would anyone want to be attacked by the United States? Well, look at what happened to the Islamic State after America declared war on it. It increased in territory probably 100-fold. It increased in weaponry 100-fold. It increased in international prominence more than 100-fold. It increased in wealth by more than 100-fold. And every measure that you could take of the Islamic State, it is 100-fold bigger and stronger than it was before America declared war on it.
I agree. That's also true.
Yeah. So Islam is a religion that thrives in a climate of killing And we played right into the Islamic State's hands.
I mean, it's not only the Americans. I mean, look at Hamas. Hamas starts shooting rockets to kill civilians in Israel. Israel retaliates, and then they claim they are victims.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Muslims are never victims, by the way.
No, they're victimizers. Always have been.
Absolutely. Muhammad was never a victim, no matter how much the Muslims or the traditions about Islam speak of Muhammad as a victim. He was never a victim.
Ever.
He was the one who attacked his own people. He was the one who denigrated their religion. He was the one who insulted them.
Right.
He was the one who murdered them, and then he was the one who mutilated them, the people he murdered.
He never fought to defend Islam, ever.
Never.
Which is the myth of Islam, but cannot be substantiated in any of the hadith or in the Quran.
Correct.
Muhammad is always the aggressor. Now, killing the Pentagon is just so excited that they caught him. We killed Jihadi John.
How do they know?
Well, let's just say that they did. Let's just give them credit and say that they're gloating over killing Jihadi John. How important was Jihadi John to the Islamic State?
1 billion.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, once he became so famous for his two videos, he was never seen again.
Correct. In fact, there were rumors in the Middle East that he was murdered by his own people.
Right.
But he was
Because
becoming too big.
Too big for his own britches, but not in terms of anything other than internet propaganda. He never led a raid. He's not a leader of any militia unit for the Islamic State. He's not involved in their administration, not involved in their fundraising, not involved in anything that they do. So the United States has devoted the last 2 years to tracking him down, and we devoted countless drone missions to killing him, and now we're gloating about killing him, and he didn't mean squat to the Islamic State.
Absolutely. In the mafia, they have what they call the soldiers. Who are the soldiers? They are the dispensable people.
Right.
Dispensable. That's what they call them.
Right. This guy was dispensable.
Fine.
Yeah, this guy was meaningless
Totally
to him.
dispensable. Totally. Absolutely. Totally dispensable.
Do you think that there's anybody in the Islamic State that's going to change their behavior one iota because Jihadi John is dead?
Well, Osama bin Laden is dead. Has it changed anything? The answer is no.
No. Nothing. That's why this whole idea of seeking revenge for revenge's sake, which is how our military works, what a stupid concept. Think of all the people that have died for us to gloat that we got revenge. We got him. Makes no difference whatsoever.
Because the idea of killing Muslims, the idea of killing so-called terrorists, and they are terrorists.
They are terrorists, yeah, they are terrorists. They're Muslims,
but
after all.
the idea of killing them and gloating over them is not going to solve the problem.
Correct.
You and I, we've been talking about this since 9/11, most probably, since after 9/11. Anyway.
Yes, we have.
We always said the only solution is to quarantine Muslims.
Correct.
To separate them from us, to let them die in their own countries, to starve to death. This is not incompassionate. This is not merciless. In fact, this is the most merciful thing we can do in humanity.
Yeah. Matter of fact, we don't want to starve them. We're not going to. We wouldn't do anything. I mean, there are two things that have to be done with Islam, and the things that cannot be done. You cannot continue to arm them. You cannot continue to enrich them. You cannot continue to bomb them. You cannot shoot bullets at them. The two things that have to be done is the first, collectively, we need more people, particularly in places where they have a podium, to show a backbone, to show some intelligence, to shed their ignorance about Islam, to read the Quran and Hadith, and then expose Islam as the disgusting criminal enterprise, a declaration of war, a terrorist manifesto that it is, because there's nothing redeeming about Islam. It is the worst disease ever perpetrated on humankind. And we need to expose the stupidness of the Quran, the stupidity of the Quran, its historical errors, its scientific errors, its immorality, its contradictions.
Yeah, the word immorality is the exact one. I couldn't find, and you couldn't find, a single moral precept that Muhammad created outside what he plagiarized from the Jews and the Christians and the Buddhists and the Hindus.
Correct.
Not one.
Not one. No, there's not an original thought in the Quran. Not a single original thought. And you know, the reason that you need to expose the Quran and Hadith as immoral and ignorant and dishonest and just overall stupid is because once you show conclusively that this religion is based upon just the ignorant rantings of a depraved individual, and then once you demonstrate that Muhammad was a ruthless terrorist, a slave trader, a pedophile and a rapist, and a mass murderer, at that point you're doing Muslims a favor to expose and condemn the religion. And once you do that, then you're in a position where you can say, okay, well, if you don't want to give up the religion, you want to cling to this thing that's stupid, that's deadly, that's destructive, then the best thing we can do is to quarantine it. So I think the first thing you have to do is expose and condemn Islam based upon its Quran and Hadith so that people understand why the religion has to be quarantined.
Yeah, on numerous occasions for the last 8 years, I've always said, if the news media, the television programs, put once a week a chapter of yours, any chapter of yours, or a chapter of mine, once a week.
Once a week.
In 1 year, Islam will be a laughing stock.
Correct.
It will be quarantined.
Correct.
It will be called a fascist, Nazi-style organized crime syndicate.
Right.
By everybody.
Yeah, it's a blend of Nazism and the mafia.
Absolutely, but nobody in the media is willing to do that. That's the tragedy. That's the tragedy. We don't even have to fight a war.
No, of course not. No, in fact, fighting the war plays into Islam's hands. It works against everyone. Stop the war. Stop the military. Stop the bombing. Stop the killing. Stop the drones. All you're doing is making it worse. You're spreading it, just as we're seeing with the refugees that have come out of as a result of our interventions and military stupidity. What you need to do is shed your ignorance, confront the truth, use evidence and reason to expose and condemn Islam based upon the Quran and Hadith, based upon the perversion of Muhammad's life. And then once you know how disgusting it is, then people will recognize that in the West where you have a choice, you've got to be a moron to be a Muslim. You have to be a complete nincompoop to go kill others in the name of this wannabe God. And
you have to be a criminal mind.
Right. And then
you have to be a criminal. You have no choice. Your psychological profile has to be that of Muhammad. Right. Muhammad was a criminal, 100% pathological liar, a narcissist, a mass murderer, exactly what you said.
Yes.
But to be a Muslim, you have to have a criminal mind. And they are all criminals, by the way.
Right, they are.
I'm not brushing them all.
Right.
They say, and they declare it, Hamas declares it, Boko Haram does it, we love death.
Right, more than you love life.
Anybody who loves death cannot possibly have two brain cells of logic. It's impossible.
No, or morality. It's just this whole notion that women are being lashed and stoned to death for having sex outside of marriage throughout the Islamic world, like today in Afghanistan and the Maldives. And yet the reward for killing others, being killed while killing others for Allah, is countless and endless sex with virgins with whom you're not married. I mean, how stupid do you have to believe that?
Their own book. Yeah. There is nowhere in the Quran a single verse which says that if a woman who is not married has sex with a man who is not married, will be stoned to death. Nowhere.
Nowhere. No. Nope. But since the Quran condones rape, that men can rape their sex slaves, and since the testimony of a woman is worthless, that means that men can rape all they want to, and so they just choose to beat the woman for it. Now, the bottom line here is that neither you nor I want to engage in any violence of any kind against any Muslim. What we want to do is we want to save Muslims from Islam, they're the primary victim of Islam, by exposing the truth about Muhammad in the Quran. And then, once we know that, to quarantine it. Now, what do we mean by quarantine it? You don't allow millions of Muslims to migrate into your home. You don't buy OPEC oil, because you're fueling Islamic terrorism when you do. You don't provide Muslims with weapons, because they become vastly more deadly when you do. So all the things that we have been doing, you have to stop doing. You don't do business with them. You don't buy their oil. You don't supply them with weapons, and you never intervene. You never invade an Islamic country. You leave them alone.
Correct. But somebody will ask you what we do with the Muslims that we have.
All right.
Something else has got to be asked.
Okay. All right. Then okay. So here, right.
Every single madrasa.
Correct.
Under
Correct.
the law, by the way,
Correct.
we are not perverting the law.
Correct. No, we aren't. No, as a matter of fact, because it is illegal to inspire rape, pedophilia, mass murder, terrorism. It is illegal to inspire those things, and that's what Islam does. So Islam is illegal. Right.
In every mosque, in every madrasa.
Right. Every place there is a Quran.
Thank you.
So so in the Islamic world, you just simply leave them alone. You don't do business with them. You don't supply them with weapons. You don't fund them. Just completely isolate them. Now, whether or not they figure out a way to grow food, that's their thing. We're not starving them. We're just not going to help them kill themselves and the rest of the world. Now, the next thing that you have to do is you've got to deal with the millions of Muslims that are already infected places that are not primarily Islamic nations. And the first thing you have to do is to correctly assess Islam, that it's a criminal enterprise and that it is a terrorist manifesto, and you have to therefore declare it as illegal. And so you declare Islam illegal, and therefore all mosques have to be closed. And all organizations like CARE have to be shuttered. So there can be no Islamic organization, no Islamic mosque, and that if anybody, as a Muslim, decides that they wish to impose Islam on their community, they must be exported.
Now, I would put them on trial first for literally breaking the law.
Well,
and then I would take them out.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I don't want to do a Trump here and say that all Muslims living in America are going to be exported. Only those that want to impose Islam. I'm a free will kind of person. If you want to inject heroin into your veins, I think you ought to be able to do it. Just don't ask for any help from society to fix you up. And don't go and start stealing to support your habit. And the same thing would be true with religion. I think all religion is in essence injecting heroin into your veins. You want to do it, it ought to be your choice. It's just that when you do it and as part of doing it, you infringe on the rights of others, then you have to be held accountable. In Islam, I'd view it exactly the same way with a Muslim in Europe or America. You want to inject that poison into your veins, that's your call. You act upon it, you do something that is inappropriate based upon it, then you're a criminal and you need to be prosecuted as such. So you can't play Muslim, even though you can be a Muslim. But
well,
Can you actually be a Muslim and not play Muslim, according to the Quran?
You can't be a Muslim and not be a Sharia obedient person. And the minute you are Sharia obedient, you are anti-constitution.
Yeah, well, the Ninth Surah makes it clear. If you're not a jihadi Muslim, you're not a Muslim. That's what the Ninth Surah of the Quran was written to communicate. So you're right. It is technically impossible, but I would not send people to jail or export them because they chose to inject the most poisonous venom ever conceived by man, Islam, into their veins, but instead because they act upon it. And acting upon it will put them, will mark them as criminals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As we speak, Merkel is having problems now in Germany.
Yeah, of course.
Because at last, it took 30 years for the Germans and Europeans to bestir themselves about the disease of Islam that has infected the body of Europe.
Yeah. And what they have done by doing exactly the opposite of what must be done. You know, quarantine versus wholesale incorporation. What they have done is they have already destroyed their future. There is no hope. And Merkel will be challenged. She will lose power. It will be viewed within a matter of a year or so the single dumbest decision any head of state ever made. Catastrophic. But the damage is already done.
But you can rectify the damage. When you have a will, there's always a way.
Well, there is a way. The way we've just articulated.
Right, but
it's a three-step process. You educate people based upon what the Quran and Hadith actually say to destroy Islam's credibility. Because it has no credibility. It's just ignorance of people and political correctness that keeps most people from recognizing it. And you actually prove conclusively that Islam is repulsive. Just absolutely repulsive and corrosive in what it does and deadly. And so you do that first. The second is you stop doing business with Islamic countries. You don't buy their oil. You don't supply them with weapons. And number three, you don't allow, as part of that, you don't allow them to immigrate into your country. And number four, when a Muslim acts upon Islam, there have to be a direct consequence for that. What do you think the odds are, IQ, that we're going to do all three of those things, much less any of those three?
It looks like 1%.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a 1% hope that Europe will wake up and respond to the travesty they have inflicted upon themselves. IQ, if Europe chooses the 99% option, it just doesn't choose, but it doesn't have enough people to stand up like you, explaining the ills of Islam and why it needs to be quarantined. What's going to happen to Europe?
It will be destroyed. It's self-destructing. Look, 160 to 180,000 already in Europe. I would say at least 20% of those people who are 75% young people, 20% of them are jihadi Muslims.
Yeah.
There is going to be chaos. There is going to be death and destruction.
Right.
And if they don't take care of themselves, I'm telling you, between now and the 31st of March 2016, that's why I gave a time limit. They're finished.
Yeah. IQ, wasn't the big issue with British and French and German Muslims going to join the Islamic State, of which thousands and probably tens of thousands have done, that they would come back and then perpetrate acts of terror?
Of course, and they were allowing them. They said they are allowed. They have every right to come back.
Okay, but just think about this for a moment. They would imprison a young Muslim, boy or girl, for trying to go and join the Islamic State, and that was a crime, and they were imprisoned because they didn't want them to come back. So they kept them there as opposed to send them away, which is pretty stupid. But aren't they bringing 1 million Syrians into Europe?
Syrians. Do me a favor, with all due respect, they're not Syrians.
Yeah.
Look at them, they're black people. They're Afghanis, they're Pakistanis. is, Syria has 28 million people, of whom only 10% are Christian.
Right.
All these people, the majority of these people who came to Europe now are not from Syria.
Yeah, that's true. They are the lead country is actually Afghanistan, and number two is Libya. And there are a number of Iraqis and Syrians that have come, but the Syrians that have come are all Muslims. And in fact, all of those who have come are Muslims. But the whole idea of we can't allow a young person to go over and join the Islamic State, but we're going to bring in millions of them.
Because out of stupidity.
Oh, I mean, how could you be any more stupid than that? You say, we can't let them go, and we're going to arrest them if they try to go, and yet we're going to bring them in by the millions.
Yeah. There is no logic anymore.
Oh, but they would say, oh, but it's a different brand of Islam. Oh, there are different brands of Islam? Maybe you could show me the peaceful Quran, because I've never seen one.
Well, anybody who can tell you there are brands of Islam is a liar or a stupid person. I wouldn't call them ignorant. Never. I would never call them ignorant.
Yeah,
Are either liars or stupid.
Were there two Muhammads? Was there a non-jihadi Muhammad and a peaceful Muhammad and a jihadist Muhammad?
Never. Muhammad was a criminal. Always.
Right, always. From the very moment that he began to perpetrate Islam, he was a violent, dishonest, perverted thug. Now, are there two different Allahs? Is there a peaceful Allah and a terrorist Allah?
Well, considering the fact that Allah spent a lot of his time torturing infidels and apostate Muslims, no.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when Allah is depicted engaging with the first Muslims, how is he always depicted? There's a single word that's always used to describe Allah's engagements with the first Muslims. Terror. He terrorized them.
Yeah.
So there aren't, according to the Quran, there's only one Allah, and he's a terrorist. There's only one Muhammad, and he's a terrorist. So how can there be... Right. So that's correct. That's why they are one and the same. So how can there be a different Islam than the Islam that motivates the jihadis to want to flee Europe to go join the Islamic State versus the Muslims in those areas fleeing those areas to go and invade Europe?
No difference. None. Zero.
The mosque that the Saudi Arabians are going to fund to keep Islam, traditional Sunni Islam, alive with all of these Muslims. Do they have a Quran that maybe we haven't read, a different Quran, or is there only one Quran?
It's the same Quran that the Sunnis and the Shia read, and every brand of Islam read. It is exactly the same. There are no shades in Islam.
You know, yesterday there were 3 suicide bombings, 3 different countries. Suicide bombing in Baghdad, suicide bombing in Lebanon. Yeah, Beirut, Lebanon, killed over 100 people there. I guess 41 killed, 218 mutilated, and one in Yemen, all within 24 hours. Was there a common denominator amongst those 3 suicide bomb attacks on civilians?
Yes, Quran.
Yeah, Muslims. As a matter of fact, why is it that 100% of terrorist acts today are perpetrated by Muslims? Is there a common denominator when 100% of the terrorist acts are perpetrated by a singular belief system?
Again, the Quran.
Right.
Sharia, Quran, Sharia, Quran, Sharia. You can't change that. It's impossible.
The terrorists that killed the American ambassador and 3 others in Libya, what was the name of that terrorist organization?
Was it the Nusra?
No. Ansar Sharia.
Ansar Sharia, yes.
Yeah. And what does that mean?
The supporters of Sharia.
Right. And Sharia is based on what?
Terror. On Quran and Muhammad Sunnah.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it's entirely based on Muhammad's Sunnah. Let's be honest about it. And Muhammad's Sunnah is recorded in what place?
In the Hadith.
Okay. And what does the Hadith show that Muhammad said and did that is the basis of Sharia?
That he was a terrorist.
Yeah. And a rapist.
Yeah, but it adds up to the same thing.
And a pedophile.
That's what terrorists do.
That's what.
They murder, they rape,
that's correct.
they take slaves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you are a terrorist, then you're going to take advantage of civilians, and you're going to rob them, and you're going to rape them, and that robbery and rape and torturous murder and beheadings, all of that falls under the nature of terror. In fact, you could almost say Muhammad terror synonymous, Quran terror synonymous, Allah terror synonymous.
But it's not anonymous. It's in front of you.
Right.
It's 24 hours in front of us.
Yeah.
In 180 countries on the face of the planet.
Right.
In 180 countries now.
Right. Yeah, in
You
fact.
go to Africa, we have problems.
Yeah.
You go to Latin America, we have problems. We have to North America, we have problems. In Europe, we have problems. In Asia, we have problems. In Australia, they have problems.
Yeah. I've been studying Proverbs 6, and Yahowah says that the Torah equals light, and that the Torah equals the way to life. With Islam, you could say that the Quran equals darkness, and that the Quran is the way of death.
Yes. Darkness and death is the Quran. 100%.
Right. Yeah. That's really all it is darkness and death. And every place it has gone, been darkness and death.
That's
Every country, yeah. Tell us about the conditions that exist in every Islamic country as absolute proof of this.
In 57 Muslim majority states, what do we have? The least productive, least inventive, least creative human beings.
Right. Darkness, gloom.
Darkness, yes.
Yeah. The lack of enlightenment. If you want proof that Islam is dark and deadly, look at life in all of the Islamic majority countries.
Okay. Take another one.
Okay.
Can any human being name 10 Muslims, only 10, out of 2,000 million in the last 500 years who have given anything to the betterment and advancement of humanity in any field? Because the answer is no. You can't even name 5 of them.
No.
Why is that possible?
Right.
Because
not in music, not in art, not in medicine, not in the sciences, not in architecture, nowhere.
Zero in any of them.
Right. In fact, even in man's most deadly and demonic business, which is the creation of weapons, there hasn't been a weapon invented by or built by a Muslim of any consequence.
Again, you're right. Yes. Not even weapons did they create.
No.
All they do, they improvise.
Why don't you tell me what cars were designed and are principally manufactured in an Islamic country?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me what kind of aircraft were designed and are primarily manufactured in an Islamic country?
None. Zero. Nowhere. They don't exist. Now, oh, by the way, now, to be fair, they are now improving things in Iran. In Iran, not Persia, in Iran.
Because of the legacy of Babylon and Persia, there in Iran there are still some smart people, and they're not able to invent, for example, a ballistic missile. They're able to buy ballistic missiles and work with the Chinese and the Koreans to adapt them to their intent.
Yes.
But that's about it.
They haven't created anything. Islam has not created anything in maybe even 700 years. Forget about 500 years.
Yeah. Oh, this is the truth. One of the things that we have talked about a lot is the stupidity of America and Syria playing into the hands of the Islamic State and making it a war zone. And that what America did in the Ukraine to create the impression that Russia is the belligerent when it was America, so isolated Russia from America that the Russians are now engaged in Syria. Do you know what the Russians unveiled yesterday?
Yes, a special ballistic missile, a torpedo.
Correct. Yes, it's a cobalt.
Nuclear torpedo of gigantic dimensions.
Right. A cobalt stab. Yes. But not only would it put a 500-foot tsunami that would go 1,000 miles inland, and it would essentially, with one of these, you would render the east coast of the United States uninhabitable.
Even the west coast, whatever does it make.
Right. So two of them, you eliminate the east and west coast, and it's a cobalt device. So not only would it create a tsunami that destroys all life, 500-foot tsunami that goes 1,000 miles inland on both sides, but cobalt. When I was writing Tea with Terrorists, I predicted how Muslims would ultimately destroy America's cities, and one of the things that became obvious to me is that they're going to use cobalt. It's one of the daughter products of their nuclear reaction, for example, a nuclear reactor in Iran. They're going to use cobalt because cobalt's, you could make a pillow of plutonium. You could make a blanket of plutonium and it would never affect you because the half-life on plutonium is gargantuanly long. Cobalt is 5-year half-life. Cobalt, any place within hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of miles of where a cobalt device is detonated, it becomes uninhabitable. The radiation from cobalt is so deadly because of its half-life that this bomb that the Russians have says, okay, you want to continue to screw with us? Here's what we're going to do, America. You've got your missile defense shield? Yeah, try to deal with this. Try to deal with this. You can't. You want to continue to screw with us?
Yeah.
We'll destroy you. And by the way, America is belligerent. What do you know what we're doing with the Chinese right now? We're flying B-52s over their coast, taunting them. What says peace and harmony more than a B-52 bomber? Where Russia's decided they're going to start, they're bombing the anti-Assad Sunni jihadists, and what has America decided to do is to provide them with anti-aircraft missiles and anti-personnel missiles. Now, how do you think that's going to turn out?
It goes against America in the end. It will go against Europe in the end. It goes against Israel in the end.
Right.
It will be turned against us.
Right. And if Russia's finally pushes back, if we continue to push Russia's back against the wall, and the Chinese right along with them, we continue to beleaguer them and taunt them, the Russians have now told us how they're going to deal with us. And if you're within 1,000 miles of either coast, you're gone.
But, pure logic. If they are taunting, America and Europe are taunting the two biggest superpowers on the planet. China alone is 1.3 billion people. China alone. And you want to mess with them? And they're not stupid people anymore.
No, they're the manufacturing engine of the world.
Producing the latest technology in the world.
Their source of raw materials, the rare earth elements, and their manufactured products, if they were to stop providing the rare earth elements and stop providing those manufactured products, we cease to be functional. The telephones that we are so linked to, our computers that we are so connected with, all of our technological switch, everything comes from China, and we're taunting the Chinese.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, we're taunting the Russians, and they just said, Putin, and I will guarantee you that the video which showed the plans for the Cobalt submersible torpedo, and it's actually a drone submersible. I will guarantee you that it was not released by accident.
Good God, of course it wasn't. You know that. And anybody with 2 brains of logic, the Russians would never reveal their secrets by mistake.
Correct. So we need to understand what caused this. And what caused it, and because you and I mostly talk about Islam, but occasionally we move beyond Islam, and we talked a lot about what America did in the Ukraine to inspire the thugs to take over Kiev, and then to arm the Kiev regime against the ethnic Russians in Donetsk and Luhansk, and painting the Russians as the bad guy, and then sanctioning them and doing everything that we could against the Russians to revitalize NATO. And it led directly to the Russians engaging with Iran and engaging in Syria, and it became the blunder that will start World War III. And now we've seen the weapon that will end it.
But really, in reality, had they incorporated Russia and China, Islam would cease to exist.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way where you have Russia, China, Europe, and America together. Islam would cease to exist.
Well, you know, what's interesting, had America not played this belligerent role, there would have been no reason why Russia would have had to have bonded with Iran, nor China having bonded with Iran. But both China has bonded with Pakistan and with Iran and with Afghanistan, and the Russians likewise, because of what the Americans have done. And had that not occurred, Shia Islam would have been already obliterated by Sunni Islam. The reason the war in Syria exists is that we came to the aid of Shia Islam. America did.
But yeah, to be fair, it's not only America. It's the whole of bloody Europe.
Yes.
It's not only America.
Yeah, it's true.
All of the Europeans are complicit. All of them.
Have you seen the movie Spectre?
Yes, yes.
You know, the movie Spectre is a true story.
Okay.
The 10-nation affiliation of spying, where everybody, including elected officials, are spied on and people are controlled via a 10-nation consortium that collects data on everything that everybody does all the time. That's the theme of Spectre and how that inspires absolute control and absolute evil. That story is true. And so, yes, Europe is complicit. We're all in this. The countries of Europe and the United States are in cahoots in doing this. And with all of the data that we have collected, we still don't have a single intelligent response.
None. Not one.
Not a single moral response, not a single intelligence response. That's why I don't think that your chances of 1% of Europe reacting and quarantining Islam, exposing and condemning Islam, I don't think it's 1%, because collectively the world is awash in information and there don't seem to be even a handful of intelligent responses.
Yeah, but you see, you're missing one thing.
Okay.
I'm trying not to miss.
Okay.
The elderly men and women in Europe, they are the ones who are suffering because of the invasion.
Correct.
Of the Muslim invasion. They are suffering. There's no question. They are raping women in France. They are raping women in Germany. They are raping women, and I'm talking about magnitudes, 1,400% more in Sweden. These cannot continue, no matter how much the news media will fluff it and cover it. It will not continue. They will rebel. And this is what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the leaders. The leaders are literally complicit with the Muslims. 100%.
Correct.
I'm looking for the men and women who are suffering. The American Revolution was not conducted by a government. They were elderly men and women, literally. That's what they were, civilians, armed civilians. They rebelled against the greatest power on earth, Britain at the time. It was the greatest power on earth. They rebelled and they overthrew them. It is not impossible. This is why I'm giving it 1%.
Okay. And I hope you're right. I think we both see the same thing coming. We see anarchy. And anarchy is going to come in many forms. Part of the anarchy will come as Muslims act like Muslims, and there will be murders and jihadi acts and terrorism and rapes and pedophilia. That'll be part of it. Part of it is going to come because Muslims don't work. It's not, the values of work are not embedded in Islam, and therefore they will be such a burden economically that the system implodes.
90% of Muslims are parasites in Europe and America.
Yes. And the other
there's not racism. There's not racism Islam is not a race.
Right.
It's a cult belief system. And the cult is a parasitic cult.
Yeah. One of the things that I did early in my life is I studied growth of organizations. And one of the things that I found in growth of organizations, if an organization grows, is because they share common values. And because the values of Islam are the antithesis of the values of Judeo-Christianity, which became the basis of the West, and the values of Islam are the antithesis of socialist secular humanism. Because they are literally the antithesis, it's going to tear Europe apart, because that which does not grow dies. And so that's the third reason that we are headed for absolute anarchy and chaos. And any one of those three by themselves would lead to this.
And it will happen.
It's going to happen. Now, the issue then is when it happens, what is the result? Does the government come down with an iron hand and impose dictatorial control? Or do the people actually prevail over their government and they respond in an intelligent way and a moral way and they kick out the disease?
We'll have to wait and see.
It will be interesting to watch, as you are interesting to listen to, my friend. The most sane and compassionate and courageous voice in the world today, that of IQ al-Rassooli. My pleasure.